Hi everybody, it's Kathy here. How are you doing today? Today I've got the lovely Kora, and we're coming to you transatlantic. We're coming to the UK and the USA. Is a really friend of mine. We met several years ago when her daughter transitioned through a joint friend of ours, Laura. Kora, tell us your story. Tell us McKenna's story and about your daughter. How did it come to be? And tell me about kind of your relationship and how you've moved through grief.
Ooh, that's a big loaded thing. So I'll start from the beginning. Mother of four, nurse, my girls all very busy, active, and just kind of a big, loud, crazy house is kind of just what we've always had. And I was on a mission trip. My daughter was 19. I was on a mission trip for cleft palate surgery, and I had this deep sense of something coming. So I bought travel insurance, which, I don't buy warranties on anything. I don't buy travel insurance. I'm kind of like, if it's going to break, it's going to break. And I bought travel insurance, and my husband called me while I was in the operating theater. And I just remember getting the call, our daughter has died, and she took her life, and that started this whole process. Looking back, you would ask me if I thought it was like a preordained, is this kind of like the contract that souls take out? I go back and forth on that. McKenna said to me, and I don't think she was suicidal. She had said to me maybe a year or two beforehand, she had said, we were joking about zombie apocalypse or something. I don't remember. We love superhero movies and zombies and what Harry Potter. We are big Harry Potter people. Anyways, and so she had said to me, well, I won't be here for anything like that. It was just really weird and out of the blue. And I said, what do you mean? She goes, I just don't think I'm going to live to that age for anything like that. And I remember looking back later thinking, it was such an odd comment. And she hadn't been exhibiting any signs of anything at that time. So that is on the path of like the whole preordained thing.
For you.
But on the other hand, I also am a big advocate for especially peers speaking out, because just yesterday I heard of a young 14-year-old boy who tried to overdose. And thankfully, his friends spoke out, which usually they don't, and actually saved his life. And so I think in McKenna's sense, she did struggle with a lot of identity and feeling bad about herself. Just, the world the way it is, young girls struggle with that kind of stuff. And she had she only has a couple little friends, and they had given her a lot of alcohol and cocaine. And she, of course, everyone knows when you go up, you have to come down. And when she came down really hard in the middle of the night, and all those feelings of self-worth and whatever. And I to this day believe that she crossed over and didn't even know she got there. It was kind of like, whoa, what happened? Because I just think between the substances and stuff, I think she had it in the back of her head that this might have been an out. If things get too rough, I've always got this out, like an anxiety kind of thing. And I think between the alcohol and having that out in her head, kind of like a passive suicidal ideations, I think that she chose that. Do I think things are preordained, or do I think we still have the choice to help each other and make a different choice? Yeah, I still believe in that free will. So it's a tough one.
You pull two concepts in your mind at once, so you're open to both, but you're tiptoeing around. You're not positive, but there are some signs that there were some precognitive warnings or kind of thoughts that came through that you couldn't kind of explain, that could have just been coincidence, but you don't know. Suicide is, I think, the number 10 killer in the world. It's the number 1 of under 21s in the USA, number 2, I think, in the UK. I'm not sure if that's just for young men as opposed to both genders, but I know that it's a high up there on the list, and it's frighteningly common, isn't it? We don't talk about it enough. We shy away from it. So I'm really proud that you're here, Kora, to share your story, because it throws up a lot of emotions. You were a really beautiful family. You've got 4 children. Everybody's got quite a loud, household. You're having a lot of fun, and you're a good mom. So share with me how do your emotions fire once McKenna transitions.
I was in total shock. There's so many things that I think helped me through the process, and one being possibly her spirit helping me through it. I'm a scientist, so I'm very logical minded, but I'm also spiritual. But some things happened that are unexplainable that helped me right out of the gate through the transition. I do think, just to go backwards before I get into that, I want to say that the number one thing is if someone loses their child from suicide, guilt is the number one killer to the parent, because and even I still have moments where I will struggle with guilt of like, if I'd have done this, if I'd have done that. But I would say to any parent, like, don't let the guilt, don't let it take you down, because it literally will kill you. I think I just have to say that, because like, it's like, don't let it, because, you know, we all do the best we can with the information we have as a parent at the moment that we're in it. You know, hindsight, you can't parent from hindsight. So I just had to say that. But we had a bunch of things happen besides meeting Laura, who we'll talk about. But even to the point of my sister flew out and she kept saying, I keep hearing this song in my head and I don't even know what this song is. And I said, well, sing it to me. And so then we Googled the lyrics, and it turned out to be Blackbird by the Beatles, which it was really odd because she didn't know the song. It was before it became popular. This is 7 years ago. It kind of came popular again recently. And so in that song, it talks about going into the light. And those words in those days right after she passed really saved me, because I was like, where is she? Like, where is she? And I can't explain it. And then, of course, I met Laura, who lost her son the same way on the same day. And we connected online on helping parents heal.
There was a few of you, wasn't there, in the group that had all had children pass in exactly the same way on the exact same day, and it kind of bonded you. Is that right?
Yeah, it was.
Inspired connection in itself, isn't it? It's like very bonding.
It was, and it also gave me a place to just talk about everything and anything, and
how much did you need that at the beginning? You just needed somebody who understood.
I did. I think the other thing too is anyone who's lost a child knows that it's the number one thing to lead to divorce. Like, because you cannot, everyone grieves. And when they say everyone grieves differently, everyone grieves so different. And I think that it's very, very easy to get angry and to hold resentment towards the people that are in your life. And so having someone else who's gone through that shared experience, you really need that. If it's in a group setting, but you have to have someone who understands, because your friends and your extended family, they, you know, after the flowers die and, you know, the gravestone is like, they're ready for you to move on. I had people try and say 6 months later, let's go to happy hour to cheer you up. And I thought, you can't, there's no cheering this up. And then they left my life because I was sad. So
I mean, that's really hard as well, because you've had a profound loss and now you lose your support system or you feel disconnected in some way. And that is really common, isn't it, Kora?
Yeah, I mean, I know you probably have heard and see that, and that's kind of where where you came in, because after we got to talking and we started kind of talking about our same experiences and what we went through and the signs, did we miss them? Did we not, you know, just all the things that you need someone to just bounce off of. Then we started talking about all the synchronicities that were just coming at us in such a fast rate. And I do believe Spirit does that to help us so that we can, you know, stay here. There is a saying, and I don't know if it's Native American, I don't know, but there's a saying about when a parent loses a child or loses someone significant, that they have one foot in each world. And I truly believe, at least for that first year, it felt like I was not solely here. And I don't know how else to explain that except to say I felt like the spirit world was very much connected. Mm-hmm. And it was just so many things. It was a constant. Things like getting on a plane and my seat somehow got switched. This is a couple months afterwards. My seats get switched and I just so happened to be next to a woman and I'm crying. I don't remember. Oh, I think I saw someone on the plane that looked like my daughter. I start crying. And this woman just that I got paired up from seats being moved, starts telling me about how she just recently lost her mother. And when her mother was passing, her brother had died earlier. She said that she just wanted to know that they were together. And she was telling me how she actually saw her mother and her brother across the street. And it was to say that they were okay. And then they were gone. And the whole story was so real and so raw. And again, it was such an odd thing that we were, sat next to each other. But these things were happening over and over again. Just like being connected with you so Laura had talked with you about her son and how he had passed. And then I had gotten your information. And, when I had talked to you and you had said things like, she's laughing about how, yes, she's kind of like Audrey Hepburn, but with the pearls. Well, I had bought those for her for graduation pearls, which you wouldn't have known that I bought all my girls' pearls for graduation. So, and just things like when we talked recently and you said she was dangling a little martini glass. Well, we had Todd and I had just done dry January. And so, but I hadn't put that out there anywhere. Nobody knew that. And her with the doctor, because I had just finished my program to be a practitioner in mental health. So, which again, I hadn't put out any announcements about that yet. And she is the reason that I have done that and that I continue forward with that. But yeah, all those synchronicities were just coming at me. And I think that's another thing. The synchronicities are very specific to the person. Like if I tell you about them, you might think, oh, that sounds cool, but they're so meaningful to the person that's having them.
So knowing, don't you get a feeling in because some people say, how do you know a sign is a sign? There's a knowing or a feeling that comes with it. There's an energy. Something touches you, something creates a resonance, and there's no words to describe it really, is that you just know it's for you, And sometimes it's so unique. When Andy and I were talking about it, he was like, his son sent him a neft dart, and he's like, it was such the thing that we always did when I first, left his mom, like we used to play neft darts all the time. And look, there in the middle of a field, in the middle of nowhere, is the neft dart in front of me. He's like, to anybody else, it's just a neft dart. But to me, it was like major. And I guess that's the same for every person that goes through this. We're not just talking about the generic things of like feathers and butterflies, although they do happen and they do exist for many people. They're big signs. It's these little synchronicities where your seat gets moved and it shouldn't be moved. And it's something very personal that connects to your daughter that's representative or in your own words, from your own story. So, you have gone on and re-educated yourself. You've changed your pathway slightly in terms of where you're going to be going forward. And you're just there celebrating, graduating in a new degree, which is just an incredible achievement. How have you done that on the back of such difficult times for her? How have you got yourself through?
Well, yeah, I don't know, except to say just on sheer grit. But, I think that I've read somewhere that doing something somewhat altruistic or something where when you go through something that has really knocked you down, doing something, some sort of act of service or putting yourself in some sort of service industry, I guess, it really helps heal. And I think that, my family had started a little nonprofit locally for mental health, and that was the start. And so I had been working on that and then I was pretty unhappy as I've been doing my regular job for a long time. And before she passed, I was actually going to go into management, nursing management. And really, I dropped everything when she passed and of course was deeply just saddened. I knew that if I could do something, especially if it was in her name or in my heart for her, and do something for other people, that it would actually, it would help me. It would help me. It would help heal me and help me move forward. And that's pretty much, I knew that to survive, I had to do something that I know could help other people. I can't go back and I can't save her. I can't do it. But I might be able to help someone else and the funny thing is I actually started off this journey wanting to help like teens or young adults that are going through similar things, but I inadvertently found that I want to help other parents and other people that are survivors of loss, because there's not even a lot of studies, grief, they still don't really understand it. Even in all of my studies, if you're still grieving after 6 months, then you must have a mental health issue. It's not really understood, I don't think. And I think
there's not a timeline, is there? There's not a timeline.
There's not. It's been 7 years for me. And I would say that I would tell anyone the first year, it's like walking through a daze. You're just trying to survive. You're trying to make sure there's, you take a shower every few days, you eat something. They tell you not to quit anything or make any big choices like divorce or whatever. And I think that's probably smart. That is what you want to do. You want to do something super drastic. I mean, I came home from Peru, and this probably sounds bizarre, but I think other people that have been through stuff would understand. I came home from Peru from the airport, and I walked into my bathroom, and my hair was even longer than it is now. And I took a pair of kitchen shears and I just cut all of my hair off and to like here. And it was this neat. I was actually walking through the airport, which is actually it's kind of I can laugh at it now, in that I'm sure these people thought that I was really something really majorly wrong. I was walking to the airport asking, do you have any scissors? I don't know why. I wanted to cut my hair in the airport. It was some need to, it makes me think back to like almost
primitive. It's like a reaction to the grief that you had to express it in a physical way.
Yes. And I don't know if other people have ever experienced it. I tried looking it up, and like back in like, I don't know if it was like the Old Testament or where like people would put ash on their face and like rip their clothing. I was having that kind of a reaction. Like I needed to do something.
As well, it's part of the needing other people to witness that something's wrong, because you want to change something so drastically and you want to get their attention. You need them to witness your grief.
Yes, it really felt that way. It felt like I had to do some sort of, and I have never felt that emotion before. I mean, it was definitely, I'm sure it is related to this overwhelming. I don't know if you've ever seen Game of Thrones. Do you know when, the mother of dragons, when she's walks through the fire and she's lost her child, she's lost her husband, and you can almost feel those emotions. That is kind of what I equate losing a child to, that kind of visual, just those feelings. And I think the part of why it's so important to talk about loss and suicide and the spirit world is because you don't know what to do with all those feelings. And
you hadn't been spiritual before this happened, had you? This just forced you into a completely different.
Well, it's kind of interesting, because my very younger years, up until probably in my early 20s, I had very much been into kind of the metaphysical. And then when I was having kids and got married, I became religious. And religion had taught me that that was all wrong. So I had kind of shoved all of that away. And even my premonition about Peru, I look back and think, maybe I just wasn't used to really kind of honing into those intuitions that I've always had. And then I think once McKenna passed, I just threw all that aside, and I was like, let myself be that person again. And I have been that person since she's passed. I don't believe that my spirituality and religion have to be something separate. And I don't believe that I'm some sort of pagan or whatever, because I believe in the spirit world. So I've decided that's my thing. And if people have a problem with it, I'm sorry. It's, again, I needed that spirit world to survive. I needed to be able to open myself up to it. And talking with you it really helped me, talking with, because knowing that her soul is still out there was super important to me. I was very trepidatious when I first talked to you. I was not sure, because I was coming from like that religious side, and I thought, I wasn't so sure what I believed, but you really, really connected with her in a way that there was really no way it was not her. So that's kind of was the first thing. The other thing is, I don't know if I told you that, so at our 1-year anniversary that I flew out to Arizona to meet Laura, and it was all another weird synchronicity thing. So she had 2 tickets to John Edwards. And I had
She loved John Edwards.
loved
That's one of
him.
my favorite off-camera conversations with her. I would listen to her stories. She was obsessed with him, and I absolutely loved her stories. And that was part of the joy of her passion. Actually, she had some incredible experiences. So you went along. How was that?
Well, so I think her mother, they were tickets for her and her mother, I believe, and her sister. And her mother couldn't go. And she just said, do you want to come out? I have a hotel for Phoenix and you just need a flight to come out here. And I was like, okay. And I said, let's go build some cairns and hike the vortexes. And she was like, okay, if you want to do that. And I'm like, yep, I want to do it. So we did. I looked up where the vortexes were and I kind of rug her along and we hiked them and built cairns at each one.
Beautiful, Kora. That's really
it was,
beautiful.
it was really amazing. And she was really struggling. She did feel synchronicities with her son, and she did get signs and felt close to him. But she was really struggling with her own spirituality and those types of things, which I think I was lucky that I already had that to tap into. And we had kind of wandered into the shop off of the road of one of the vortexes that turned out to be, and it was like a crystal store, rock store. But he took thermal images of people and would tell them kind of what their aura was. So
Millennium photography, or
it was so amazing.
it's so cool.
So you knew about it. I never.
At the beginning of my story, one of my suppliers asked me if I would. She kept saying there's something different about your aura, a really bright light. Like there's something different. At the time, I wasn't spiritual in the guise that I am now, and so she said, I just want to get your aura photographed and have a look at it in more detail. And I was kind of like, what are you talking about? It was bizarre. I was kind of buying into the whole India thing and like, wow, like India's kind of magical. Like, kind of people think differently out here, and I just wanted to experience the culture. And so I kind of went along with it a little bit naively, I guess. But what it did give me is, and it's a really profound learning actually, because 11 years later, having developed and had my awakening, I would have my photograph taken again. And what was really amazing is in the first photograph, there's lots of color and you can see a little bit of a light around the third eye. But then years later, I've worked on my light so much that energetically, it's now this beautiful white light. It's quite cosmic with just a few rays of color around the outside. And what that has helped me to express is some people, when they start the journey of personal mediumship or connection with their loved ones, they are really kind of questioning, like, is it just me? Like, what's going on? And something's happening on an energetic level. Something's changing on an energetic level. Not everything is seen with the physical eye. And so you're pushing the energy out, you're clearing the channel in order to be able to get that communication through. You have to get your stuff out of the way. And so I think aura photography is amazing when you see it, especially if you look at it, and you've got comparison from before and after it. It really is very fascinating. And also you can get a lot of information just on the color and the vibration and the frequency that what their interests are, what they're good at, their strengths, their weaknesses and stuff. So it can be very intuitively, it can be very helpful to kind of find the right level of coaching somebody or teaching somebody, I guess, as well. But how did you find it? What did you find in yours?
So that was a little bit of the beginning of our riff, and I didn't think about it until much later, but might have been the beginning of kind of my awakening. And I think that happened just with her passing, to be quite honest. We kind of went in there, we took, I talked her into doing the pictures, and again, I still feel like I was maybe 1 foot in this world, 1 foot not still. Maybe for another 6 months or so did I feel that way. But anyway.
You're seeking answers, basically.
Right. And on mine, I was quite shocked because first of all, it showed, I guess, some female energy near me. He showed me pictures. I wish I had it with me. I didn't think about it. I would show you the pictures. But there was like, I think 2 female entities that were like near me, which he didn't know that those were, my grandmother, who I was really close to, and my daughter. And then the other thing was, mine had, right where my third eye was, this purple like crown. So Laura's did not. It did have energy. I believe hers also showed her sun, but she had all the other chakras, but hers was like dark up here because it's something she had admittedly struggled with, spirit. And she had said she was like an atheist or agnostic, or I don't remember what she had said, but anyways, so she struggled with that piece, and I didn't. And so it was really,
anybody that's listening is kind of the crown chakra or the openness to spirit. And so what she's showing and expressing on the photograph is hers is closed down. It doesn't mean that it doesn't exist. It's just she hasn't opened up to that energy yet. And therefore there was a big variance. So she's kind of curious, thinking, hang on a minute, yours is different to mine. Why aren't we more alike? Does that make sense?
right. Yeah. And I think there was, but also maybe that piqued her interest to maybe become more open and more spiritual. So we went off to John Edwards, and I can't explain how I knew, because I'm going to be just honest. I don't have a lot of these intuitive feelings all the time, but I knew we were going to be called on when we went.
How many people? I mean, he used to have huge audiences. There must have been thousands of people there, was there?
There was probably at least 500 people, I want to say. Hundreds. There was hundreds of people in the room. It was at least hundreds. I don't know the number. And we were, if not the first, we were probably the second or third people called on. And he only calls on maybe 5 or 6. And I would love to have the notes from it. I have to go through all my stuff, because that whole time period is still kind of a blur of what I was doing with myself back then. Somebody took note. I think her sister took notes, but basically he said, I think he talked to her first, Laura first. He said something about someone that was into music or something that was very Chicago based, because her son was Chicago based. And she raised her hand and said, I think you could be cluing into my son. And she said something, and he went on to say, he took his life, but and then he like stopped, and he was like, and so did the person next to you, basically his daughter. And it was crazy. So he basically clued in immediately that there were 2 teens that had died. And he clued in pretty quickly that they died right around the same time. I don't remember if he said the same day, but he definitely knew it was the same time. And he did say the same mannerism, which they both did die in the same way, which is really, I've barely talked about that too much, because that's still very hard for me to talk about the way she chose to pass. But he knew. Wow. And he also knew that her son was sober and that my daughter was not. And he also knew, he clued right in. He said that they had met each other in spirit afterwards because of the 2 of us meeting. And I thought that was very cool. And then kind of, he knew all those things. He brought up some personal things, like he said that my husband was blocking talking to her, which he's not a spiritual person. And so that was true. He talked about, which was a relief to me. So I went on to he said I was not going to lose another child in the same manner. And I don't know if people know that with suicide, one of the biggest problems is that siblings are at risk, because they're so heartbroken, and mental health, it can be genetic, and then there's the environmental factors. So siblings can be at risk. And so I actually went on to have
to you, huge relief.
Well, it was a huge relief, but I ended up, so we lost my oldest daughter, who was only 18 months. Her and McKenna were just thick as thieves. So she was really struggling, and crazy as it is, just a year right after John Edwards, she lost her fiance to suicide. And then my husband lost his homeless and schizophrenic brother to suicide, who is older than him, that we didn't have any connection with. So within a couple of months, and then we had my 2 youngest, both consecutively that year and the following year, had some mental health issues where they both had to go into different treatment programs that they are now doing amazing and doing fine. But for the mama, it was, so I was just so fearful that we were going to possibly have some other issue come up. One had a boyfriend. Actually, they both had breakups with boyfriends from high school that kind of triggered their mental health issues. And like I said, I think, or like you mentioned, suicide being one of the leading causes, part of it is that the teenagers right now and young adults are so isolated. We talk about the parents being isolated and not having someone, but children right now, between social media and just the world we live in. I mean, it's not, we have just, I mean, dating is not dating anymore where you meet someone, it's all online. And I think it's just so hard with everyone being so isolated. And so I was very concerned, but they managed to get through it. And yeah, so John Edwards did mention that, and I kind of like banked on it a little bit, like they're supposed to make it through this.
Oh,
Like,
it's been so, I can't even imagine. It would, I mean, it's just frightening, but it's so frightening. You don't want to go through that situation a second time, that is for sure. I mean, it's heartbreaking the first time, and I know that you would reverse back the clock at any point if you could to try to change it.
yeah. And and with Laura, to go back to Laura, she unfortunately lived a very isolated life. So she lost her only child, and the father was not in anyone's life anymore. And she didn't live near her sister or her mother, I believe. And so she was really disconnected as she suffered from her grief. So even though she had all those, synchronicities and stuff, she just had no other real connections. And so I was clawing my way through trying to heal with the nonprofit, writing the blog, and then eventually decided to go back to school. But I think this is after she passed. But I was trying to do these different things, and I think she took them as a personal insult, like she wasn't doing them, so there must be something wrong with her. And that was not the case at all. But we split. But before we split, for that first year and a half or so, our first 2 years, it was so nice to have someone so I was telling you, we would talk to the lights. So my lights would flicker, which they don't do now, really, hardly at all. But my lights would flicker. And I would say, so weird, we're talking on the phone together. And I said, my bathroom lights are flickering. And so we would I would FaceTime her, and we'd go in the bathroom, and we would start talking to Cam and McKenna, and we're talking to these lights, and they were in my kitchen where the carousels were, and which is also so weird because I didn't even know those carousels were there.
So I gave you a free message online over Christmas from McKenna, and she was talking about these carousels and how significant they were, and that tied us into this connection of bringing you on, because Lara had just come through to Gail to say she was sorry because you and I both had to set boundaries with her. And so, we talk about these great friendships, but also, you are fragile, and self-preservation is very important during this situation. You had to make a choice in terms of setting boundaries to protect yourself at a time when she was spiraling out of control. It is hard because she had, physical illness as well as mental issues starting to arise from the grief, and as you said, was very isolated at times. I found her a very beautiful soul when she was in good spirits. I found it very challenging when she was on a downer and having a difficult time, and I would try to help her as much as I could. And so it was lovely to hear Gail, who'd never met her, bring her through. But what was really profound for me, Kora, is when she transitioned, because I'd been doing a sign of the week on my Facebook. We talk about inspired connections. Crazy. And that week I had chosen the wolf, and she had changed her name and had a fake ID out there that she'd chosen the surname Wolf. The young lady who was connected to her also had a lovely friendship with her, whose son had transitioned, contacted me and said, I think Laura's passed a spirit. And she said, I think you posting that Wolf was meant to prompt me to contact you. And I said, oh, wow, I haven't heard from her for about 6 months. But I was really shocked. I thought she was doing okay. And I actually was a little bit heartbroken. I was like, I'm really, really sorry to hear this situation. And I was like, how can I help? And she said, well, I need to know her real name. And I know that you have it. And I said, well, confidentiality wise, I can't give her real name out. What I can do is sort of guide you to the area where you could look for, for that death certificate to the city that she was living in. And maybe you can feel your way a little bit with the contacts that you've got. But what I will do for you is I will ask my grandfather, because she used to be a massive John Edwards fan. So I will call out to my granddad and I will ask him if she's there. Because I'm telling you, we're having this conversation, she's going to zoom right in on it. And literally, I said those words, I put the phone down, and the minute that I put the phone down, my phone went, and it was a lady called Karen whose son had died from suicide. And it was the early hours of the morning in America. You know, the time difference was significant. And I'd literally had this conversation, and Karen says, your granddad's here. And he's shouting, Edwards, Edwards, Edwards at me. Does that mean something to you? And I was like, oh my God, this is better than any kind of sci-fi film. Like, how does this happen? I was like, yes, it does. It means that Lara's passed. And I now need to get the information so that I can contact some of the people like Kora and Jenna who knew her really well to let them know, because I've got a responsibility to advise them. And so I said, we've got to get that certificate. So I then contacted Kay and said, Kay, like, can you know, I really do believe that this is true, that she has transitioned. We've got to find that death certificate. And fortunately for me, Kay is a very good detective. She found it. She came to me and said, I believe her real name is this. And I was able to say that's correct. And she said, I have the certificate in front of me. At which point I said, great, I will now contact Kora and Jenna. Now, what was really amazing, Kora, not only, you know, the fact that she had wanted to use me as a conduit to give you the information, but when I contacted Jenna, I said, I really need a photo of Jenna, because I'm going to have to put an obituary out there on the social media and kind of explain what's happened. There must be a lot of people that know her. And the day that she transitioned, she'd actually sent a beautiful set of photographs to Jenna, and Jenna said, I've got the photos, Kat. She sent them to me. So it's almost as if she prepared everything, Kora. That was a little bit of a strange kind of moment for me. And so Jenna gave me the information, and I put this obituary together. And I was very honest. You know, I said I had really amazing moments with her. These are the amazing moments. I had my challenges with her, and these are the challenges. But she taught me about boundaries, and she continues to do that. I know that she comes in from the other side and works with me sometimes. She's sent some great signs, people with the same name. I used to nickname her and say, you're trouble with a capital T. And the girl with the name that contacted me said, you know, oh, gosh, I'm just trouble with a capital T. And I started to giggle, because I was like, oh, I know she's working through you. You even look similar. It's like kind of crazy. So I've had some really special moments where I know that she's alongside us in spirit. And I feel profoundly grateful for having known her as long as I did. But it is really sad, isn't it, when you lose somebody from your community? And I presume that she transitioned in a similar way as well, even though she was struggling with cancer. I do feel that the fact that she gave the photographs that day to Jenna, looking so glamorous and beautiful, that she must have known Kora. And I never actually looked at the death certificate to see what it said as cause of death, but I just presumed that she had been in a really low place and had decided she just wanted to be with her son. And, you know, when she came through to Gail, she said, I'm just really happy I'm with him and everything. And I thought that was really powerful to me, because it's all that she ever wanted. And he was her life, and she absolutely adored him. So it's really interesting, isn't it? We go on this kind of wave. She helped. You know, I found her challenges sometimes were really helpful to me, because they pushed for me to get more information out of myself and my connection to be able to support her in some ways. And then there was sadness at the end, when really there was certain situations that she was doing to the people that I couldn't tolerate. And I just had to say, I'm really, really sorry, I'm out. I just can't, that's not where I come from. It's not my spirit. And I know that you went through the same thing. And it's a really weird feeling, isn't it, when you lose somebody in those circumstances, because you know that she's been through a great deal. And you've got to take judgment out of it. You can't judge a situation. That's the most powerful thing I think suicide teaches you, is that you've got to have unconditional love and non-judgment. The only thing you can have in a situation where somebody passes from suicide is compassion. And I think Robert Schwartz, actually, who's coming on in a few weeks' time, was the person that really taught me that. In fact, Robert really helped me actually with parents, because he educated me about what he'd discovered in terms of soul planning and suicide. And I found it really comforting when it comes to the could'ves, should'ves, would'ves, that he found that, you know, if somebody was supposed to be staying on the airplane, that somebody would have turned up, that something would have happened to prevent that from happening. In which case, you will hear in Dennis's podcast that's coming up, because Dennis is coming on to tell his story about Michael, separate to the one that he was telling about his wife, Shannon, he felt the same. He wanted to go to the other side, and something happened so inspired. Well, he knows he was pushed to prevent that from happening. And I find that just so incredible. It sort of shows you both sides of the coins that, there are times when that soul is supposed to stay present and they are helped to enable that to happen. So I take a little bit of comfort in that as well, Kora. I don't know how you feel about that, but it just kind of makes me feel a little bit more sort of, they're where they're supposed to be, and I've made peace with that in some way.
Yeah, like I said, I went through a time period where I didn't really, I kind of was closed off to anything along those lines. But when I was younger, I had kind of a tumultuous or very not the best childhood. I was raised by alcoholic parents, and I had gone into the military. Before I went in the military, I had gone to a psychic fair, which was, again, I didn't know much about any of this stuff. But I met this woman who had, I think she had MS, some sort of very physical, debilitating disease, but somehow that had made her so connected to the spiritual world. It was very interesting. But anyways, she had said to me, and almost everything she's ever said to me that I remember has been very accurate. She had told me that I was going to not live anywhere near there. She said I was going to marry someone that was like an only child, but wasn't. My husband was raised an only child, but did have a brother. That all these things. And the one thing she also said is, she said I was going to have, she described three children, me raising 3 children. Well, I had 4. And she talked all about, this one's going to do this politically and this one's going to do that. So it was really odd when I was raising 4. I remember looking back and thinking that it's really odd. She talked about my 3 children. So I don't know. That was interesting. And then the other thing that she said was that I was going to go through something, no, she didn't use the word tragic. What did she say? I was going to go through something that would almost take me out in my midlife. And I'm thinking cancer, surgery, something like that. I now know that she was talking about the loss of my daughter because, I'd be honest, I barely survived it. And, I think having, like I said, helping parents heal, having other people in my community, and just trying to survive.
I think that's really important, actually, Kora. You raised a really good point. Is mediums and spiritual workers and light workers a lot of flack. But actually, they do save lives. I'm not talking about myself from a place of ego, or I'm just saying about the community in general. I think they don't realize actually the power of mediumship is a very healing power. And to be able to have that evidence of communication after a transition of such trauma can give you the peace to be able to sleep easy at night or feel a little bit calmer. And I think if we were a little bit more open-minded and saw it as the healing tool that it is, that we would be a bit more generous in society is basically, because I really do feel that, I find it really interesting, Kora, that we haven't seen each other 2-3 years. And just like Maria, who's on the podcast before you, suddenly, as soon as I start this podcast, which I knew the kids were running, I knew it was out of my hands. I didn't want to do a podcast. I fought against it. And suddenly it's here and it's arrived, and that I'm kicking and screaming and they're not giving in. And so I surrender. I surrendered to Carly and her request. And from that moment onwards, strange things happened. People I hadn't seen for 2 or 3 years, not knowing that I had a podcast or anything, suddenly got back in touch. And I was like, I can see that is the kids like, I'm coming. I want my story told, Kat, or I want to, are you supported us? We're coming to support you. And it was just this lovely kind of, feeling of like, how nice that they connect the living. And we still have a friendship, even though, I don't actively work with you anymore. But I've given you lovely readings and stuff online. I think it's lovely that maybe sometimes people come into your life for a period of time and you have this connection, and sometimes Spirit bring them back in, and it's just really wonderful. And I even think that Lara as well, I love the way that Spirit brought her back in from the other side and gave me synchronicities to give me the peace of mind, let me know that she's all right. And also to say, will you forgive me? I'm sorry. I love that we can have those words unsaid that are often not said, across the veil and give closure. It gave me comfort. It gave me closure. So I've been on the receiving end of these beautiful messages as well. And, I just take pleasure in that, Kora. It's made a difference to me. It's made a difference to my energy and how I feel. I feel at peace, very comforted at where I landed with her and my journey with her when I was with her. And so, yeah, it's a really interesting one, isn't it? It's like, I feel like it comes full circle, but it's great to see that McKenna wasn't going to be left out. She wanted to be on the podcast and she was adamant she was going to be in there first. But also the subject of suicide, it's very important we talk about, and people try to shy away from it. It's very common, sadly, and people need to talk about it and people need to hear that you've come out the other side. You've re-educated yourself. Yes, you have struggled. You've worked hard at the process, Kora. Let's be honest. You have thrown everything at it. You've done grief work. You've heavy grief work, but you've also, I guess what I see in you is determination and perseverance has got you through against all the odds. You've lost a friend. You've lost your daughter. You've endured life in a very heavy way, and yet you survived it, and you still have moments of joy, and there's laughter coming back in. You enjoy the rest of your family. You've achieved this beautiful qualification and are about to take a new leap into your new career. So, I mean, as you look back now, 6-7 years on, like, are you just amazed that you have got through this? And do you, have you got joy genuinely back in your life? Do you feel different? And how do you feel about McKenna now, having come, further down the line of that journey? Do you feel closer or further away? Do you feel more connected?
Well, interestingly enough, so I felt very much connect, and I've noticed this with a lot of people, right? They say within the first year, and I would say the first 2 years, but the first year and a half for sure, I really do feel like, especially when it's a very strong connection, like a parent or a child, I do think, and you have to be open to it though, but I think spirit really connects. Yeah, you get a lot of, if you're open, you get so much. It's almost like a ratio, like you're
tap.
Yeah, it is. It is. And then I noticed, I want to say it slowly trickled to where I wasn't really getting as much of those things, but I kind of came back down to earth. I was trying to sort out, I had other kids that were having issues. I had life to deal with. So I guess I was kind of back down to earth and didn't really feel as connected in spirit with her. But then I would say over the last, I would reach out to you maybe on a couple of different anniversaries, and you had told me about some of the stuff that you were doing, and I was interested, but I was still very, I don't know how to explain it. I guess grief had still had me, and my religion held me back a little bit. So once the signs kind of diminished, I was kind of just left wondering if that was all over, to be quite honest. And then I would say once I kind of stopped focusing on it so hard over the last specifically year, I let myself be open. And I guess I've noticed I've been feeling a connection with her more in spirit. I think I'm becoming, and I don't know how to say, except I think my spirituality, my own almost mediumship, or my own, yes. And I think the grief had to be out of the way a little bit, and I had to be open, and all the other stuff had to be kind of resolved. So, and now that all that's gone, I'm seeing that I'm actually a very open, intuitive person. And so now I do feel a connection to her, but I feel a connection to her not in grief and not through another person. I'm starting to feel it. And I think it's really hard to have that when you first are going through deep grief.
I agree.
I think we need a person, we need we need a mentor. And I'm not saying I still don't need a mentor, but I feel like I'm my own spirituality, my own.
Kora, there's no greater evidence than when you experience it for yourself, because nobody can take that away. You experienced it.
Right.
It's really powerful, isn't it? Really powerful.
Yeah. And so I think that if you can get through those first, the first year or so, and if you can just remain open, I think we can learn to have those, to be that spiritual kind of open box. It's how I describe my feelings. I feel like now I'm kind of this open box, and I can connect to her. I can connect sometimes with other people. And I think it's just being open and willing. And that's all I can say. I'm actually interested in learning how to hone in on some of it more myself. But yeah, I do feel close to her now. Little things will come up that only other people would understand. The 80, I know this is going to sound 808. Hawaii's area code is 808. And the best family vacation we ever had was in Hawaii right before she passed. And she loved it. We loved it. Everybody loved it. Even when I was on my way to go take that big exam to get certified, I was just like, I am not ready. I'm not going to pass this. And twice the car in front of me had like 808 something, something, something. Now, to anyone else, that would mean nothing. But to me, it was like, got this. And honestly, every once in a while, like I would say, and this is like often, I will get some weird 808. And I remember even when Laura and I were chatting all the time, and she had her numbers. I don't remember what they were now off the top of my head. I'm sure I have it on my phone somewhere. But she would talk about these numbers. And I would say, I don't really have any numbers. But then I was getting my nursing license has 808 in it. So many different things. I have multiple numbers that keep coming up with that 808. And every time I'm really worried or anxious, I will driving somewhere and it'll be 808. And I cannot believe that there's that many license plates and signs that have 808 on it, and that they appear at the exact same moment that I'm feeling a certain way. So that's just one way that I do feel that she connects with me. And again, like I said, to anyone else, it's just probably silly. But to me, when I'm driving a 2-hour drive,
different.
And I see that this is right in front of me, I know that she's with me. My daughters have all had experiences where they have had their sister come to them.
In dream states.
And actually, so during that time, I'm sharing like really some interesting stuff. I'll just be honest. So during the time that the girls were struggling, this is actually the room that my youngest used to be in. I'm turning it into an office currently. Anyway, when she was sleeping in this room, both of them are kind of struggling on and off. My daughter gets up to go to the bathroom, and she sees what she thought was my youngest standing in the hallway. So this is just a few years ago. And she's like, "What are you doing out of bed? Get back in bed." And she doesn't answer, and she's just staring into this room, which is my youngest's room. And she's thinking, why isn't she getting back in her bed? And then she walked through her. My youngest and McKenna look very similar at the same ages. And she was so freaked out about it. She locked herself in the bathroom for like 2 hours and didn't tell me about it till the next morning. But she said, she's like, so McKenna was watching over Gabby. She goes, I literally walked through her. And I said, are you sure? And she said, I thought it was Gabby telling her to go back to bed, go to bed, go to bed. And then I walked through her. So I believe, and I was told by, I think it was John Edwards, or it was you. One of the two of you said she will be showing up for the important time periods. Well, during that time period, they were both struggling, and at that time, my daughter that said she walked through her was not a believer in any of this kind of stuff. She is now.
Wow. I mean, that is quite extraordinary, isn't it? And to anybody listening, it's like the visitations, they're like the dream state. Like you can walk through walls of the dream state. It's a different vibration of energy. There isn't solid matter. The light body is, different. And so the astral, she was able to walk through it. That's kind of crazy, isn't it? It's amazing. Well, I think that gives them comfort. Their siblings are okay now, Kora.
Yeah, I think it gives them both comfort. They've all three had different experiences with their sisters. Only the one has had that experience. But the funny thing is that daughter would not have ever believed in anything spiritual had she not had that experience. So I do think sometimes they get a hold of us in the best way they know how to.
That's really poignant. I like that. I think it's very comforting for your honesty. I thank you for your honesty. And I thank you as well for sharing your story around your whole family, because I think it's very reassuring to know that you've managed to keep the siblings secure as well, and that they're happy, they're comfortable with the signs and synchronicity. They've got an awareness that their sister's spirit lives on there, and that's with them. And it's an incredible journey. I'm thankful for the friendships that I've gained through this experience, and you're certainly one of those, Kora. So thank you for coming on today, my darling, and thank you for sharing me your story. I really appreciate you.
Thank you so much for having me. And I am excited to see where the future goes. Yeah.
Absolutely. Absolutely.